Well, it's your favorite teacher, and I'm already back. So I decided to not record my makeup because I had a feeling it kind of looks like how I always do my makeup. And I didn't want to waste anybody's time. So I'm just going to read to you guys, and I hope you don't mind. Just earlier today we read the beginning of chapter 3 and the first task of initiation of being a wild woman, which is having to let our too good mother die. Welcome to initiation task number 2. The second task is exposing the Crude shadow. In this part of the tale, the bad, rotten step-family marches into Vasilisa's world and begins to make her life miserable. The tasks of this time are learning even more mindfully to let go of the over-positive mother, finding that being good, being sweet, being nice will not cause life to sing. Vasilisa becomes a slave, but it does not help. Experiencing directly one's own shadow nature, particularly the exclusionary, jealous, and exploitive aspects of the self, the stepmother, and the stepsisters, acknowledging these unequivocally, making the best relationship one can with the worst parts of oneself, letting the pressure build between who one is taught to be and who one really is, ultimately working towards letting the old self die and the new intuitive self be born. The stepmother and stepsisters represent the underdeveloped but proactively cruel elements of the psyche. They are shadow elements, meaning aspects of oneself that are considered by the ego to be undesirable or not useful and therefore are regulated to the dark. On one hand, shadow material can be quite positive, for often a woman's gifts are pushed into the dark, hidden there and waiting to be discovered. On the other hand, negative shadow material, which can busily kill off or detain all new life, can also be turned into one's use, as we shall see. When it erupts and we fully identify its aspects and sources, we are made all the stronger and wiser. In this stage of initiation, a woman is harassed by the petty demands of her psyche, which exhort her to comply with whatever anyone wishes. Compliance causes a shocking realization that must be registered by all women. That is, to be ourselves causes us to be exiled by many others. And yet, to comply with what others want causes us to be exiled from ourselves. It is this tormenting tension that must be borne, but the choice is clear. Vasilisa is disenfranchised, for she inherits and is inherited by a family that cannot understand or appreciate her. As far as they're concerned, she is unnecessary. They hate and revile her. They treat her as the stranger, the untrustworthy one. In fairy tales, the role of the stranger or the outcast is usually played by the one who is most deeply connected to the knowing nature. The stepmother and stepsisters can be understood as creatures setting into a woman's psyche by the culture to which a woman belongs. The step-family in the psyche is different from the soul family, for it is one of the superego, that aspect of psyche which is structured according to the particular society's expectations, healthy or not, for women. These cultural, that is superego, overlays and injunctions are not experienced from women as emanating from the soul self-psyche, but are felt as if they come from out there, from other source which is not intimate. The cultural/superego overlays can be very positive or they can be very detrimental. Vasilisa's stepfamily is an intrapsychic ganglia which pinches off the nerve to life's vitality. They enter as a chorus of unredeemed hags who taunt. You can't do it. You're not good enough. You're not bold enough. You're stupid, insipid, vacant. You don't have time. You're only good for simple things. You're only allowed to do this much and no more. Give up life while you're ahead. As Vasilisa is not yet fully conscious of her powers, she allows this evil crimp in her lifeline. In order for her to regain her life, something different, something life-giving must occur. The same is true for us. We can see in the story that Vasilisa's intuition into what is happening around her is quite flimsy, and that the father of the psyche doesn't notice the hostile environment either. He is also too good and has no intuitive development himself. It is interesting to note that daughters who have naive fathers often take far longer to awaken. We too are pinched off when the step-family within us and or surrounding us tells us we are not much to begin with and insists we focus on our shortcomings rather than perceiving the cruelty whirling around us, be it emanating from within our psyches or from without in the culture. However, to see into or through something requires intuition and also the strength to stand upon what one sees. Like Vasilisa, we must try to be nice when we ought to be knowing. We may have been taught to set aside acute insight in order to get along. However, the reward for simply being nice in oppressive circumstances is to be mistreated all the more. Although a woman feels that if she is herself, she will alienate others, it is just this psychic tension that is needed in order to make soul and to create change. So, the stepmother and stepsisters scheme to send Vasilisa away. They secretly plot. Go into the forest, Vasilisa. Go to the Baba Yaga, and if you survive, haha, which you won't, then we might accept you. This is a very critical idea because many women are stuck halfway through this initiation process, sort of hanging half in and half out of the hoop. Although there is a natural predator in the psyche, one who says die and bah and why don't you give up, on a rather automatic basis, the culture in which a woman lives and the family in which she was raised can painfully exacerbate the natural but moderate naysaying aspect in the psyche. For instance, women who are raised in families that are not accepting of their gifts often set off on tremendously big quests over and over, and they don't know why. They feel they must have 3 PhDs, or they have to hang upside down from Mount Everest, or that they must execute all manner of dangerous, time-consuming, and money-eating endeavors to try to prove to their families that they have worth. Now will you accept me? No? Okay. Watch this. The step-family ganglia, of course, belongs to us by whichever means we receive it, and it is our work to deal with it in an empowered manner. However, we can see that for the deep work to continue, trying to prove one's worth to the chorus of jealous hags is pointless, and as we shall see, it in fact impedes the initiation. Vasilisa does the everyday chores without complaint. To submit without complaint is heroic seeming, but in fact causes more and more pressure and conflict between the two oppositional natures, one too good and the other too demanding, like the conflict between being over-adaptive and being ourselves. The pressure builds to a good end. A woman who is torn between these two is in a good way, but she must make the next steps. In the story, the step women so squeeze the burgoyning psyche that through their machinations the fire goes out. At this point, a woman begins to lose her psychic bearings. She may feel cold, alone, and willing to do anything to bring back the light again. This is just the jolt the two nice women need in order to continue her induction into her own power. One might say that Vasilisa has to meet the great wild hag because she needs a good scare. We have to leave the chorus of detractors and plunge into the woods. There is no way to both stay and go. Vasilisa, like us, needs some guiding light that will differentiate for her what is good for her and what is not. She cannot develop by standing around being everyone's bootjack. Women who try to make their deeper feelings invisible are deadening themselves. The fire goes out. It is a painful form of suspended animation. Conversely, and perhaps somewhat perversely, when the fire is put out, it helps to snap Vasilisa out of her submission. It causes her to die in an old way of life and to step with shivers into a new one. A new life, one which is based on an older, wiser kind of inner knowing. So that is the second task of initiation, which is exposing the cruel shadows. So as we can see, the stepsisters and the stepmother are really just another aspect of Vasilina's psyche. It's another push that she didn't necessarily think was going to be coming. So for example, when my mom passed away, I kind of thought that the death was kind of the biggest thing to deal with. You know, losing the too good mother, I thought was the biggest initiation step of itself. I didn't really expect anything to come even soon thereafter. And as we can see, one of the most underdeveloped parts of her psyche is her father. And her father is the one who is able to get over her mother's passing and marry into a new family, which we can see is really just the underdeveloped psyche of Vasilisa, who is now becoming introduced to her shadow self. The part of her that is kind of pushed to the side and she doesn't really think needs to even be met. But she comes face to face with them, which is what we see when she meets her stepsisters and her stepmother. They are ultimately the ones who cast her out into the forest. It's not just her leaving her mother's nest. It's not just her too good of mother moving on. Vasilisa kind of stayed in the middle area, right? She stayed at home. She stayed around her father. She stayed around this new family. But the more she started to realize it, the more she started to see that that family isn't on her side. And it took her being basically disowned by that step side of her psyche to step out into the woods, to venture out by herself and find Baba Yaga. and to, to see and hear all of the things that Baba Yaga has to teach. If she would have never ever came to her shadow self, she would have never ventured out into the woods. So as uncomfortable as it is to become, face to face with the shadow self of us, the part of us that stops ourselves when we want to do something, the part of us that wants to be accepted so much, but then there's this other voice in our head that's just like, no, 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 you don't need to do that, or you've already made it this far, this is far enough, just stay here. That's the step family. That's the part of us that we all have. It's just another underdeveloped part of us that we just have to become aware of, We can't close that door and just try to go through the next step of initiation, right? So I think that's so amazing that our first step of becoming a wild woman is understanding that the too good part of ourselves has to die off. We have to allow that to leave. And then the next part is understanding that there's going to be parts of us that we may have never heard before. We may hear parts of ourselves that we used to hear back in the day when we were still in the nest, but something about us made us forget about it, or a part of our inner voice was just like, nah, don't listen to that negative thought, and we literally pushed it away. But now when we are so vulnerable and open to, like they said, an environment that is not motherly to us, we start having these voices creep up and be louder and louder, and it's because they're no longer being suppressed. And I feel like it's a part where it's really you go forward or you stay stuck. It is so easy to stay stuck and to listen to those voices. But I think when we compare it to this story, that those voices, they're not foreign voices. They're not evil spirits coming to talk to us. It's a part of our psyche, our ego, that we've never dealt with. It's been so suppressed, and as loud as it is, and it's been so quiet, now it's going to start screaming, and it's going to kick you out. It's going to make you feel like you're not even yourself. But it's fighting through that and allowing that part of you to say, you know what, bye, and you run from it and run into the woods. Leave the too good mother, leave the stepmom, venture out into the woods and find Baba Yaga. The initiation process just starts opening up from there, and look at the amazing progress that's already been made. Letting go of something that is so comforting and then coming face to face with something that's so scary and almost unknown to us. Now I wonder what's next. And this is why I think this is such an important life lesson for every young woman to learn. We have to let go of the too good mother, and not only that, we're going to be introduced to our shadow self that we have to learn to part ways with. We have to learn to develop those and let them go. Let that shadow self see us grow, accomplish things that we never thought we could. Because when we start accomplishing things that our step family said that we can't do, it shuts them up, and what happens? They turn to cinders in the end of the story, but how, right? It's staying strong and keeping your chin up through each initiation step. And this is only 2, we still have 8 more. So, I really hope that you guys enjoyed the second initiation process, letting go and being introduced to the shadow self. Coming face to face. And that's another thing, is sometimes we ourselves, we're not what we think we are. We're not all as we seem. So when we become introduced to a part of ourselves, we don't need to be scared. We don't need to necessarily run and hide. We don't need to be too sweet either, because remember what she said, you can't be too sweet. Compliance will not get us anywhere. So if we comply and just, okay, I guess I'll work hard, but not hard enough to make it really be shown, we're going to be stuck outside the nest and outside of the forest. We need to be in the forest, right? So we just have to keep inching our way there. And one of the ways that we just keep inching a little bit more is to make amends with our shadow self and to listen to the opposite of what they say. They say don't do it, because you never know what's on the other side of the next door. So, that shadow may be blocking a door, You may be walking around thinking you're in an empty room, but you're like, what the heck? My own shadow has been blocking my next entrance this whole time. We can think of it that way. The step family is our shadow that always follows us. And until we realize that, you're the little bit of the dark nature that's inside of me, but you're also the one who pushed me into the forest. You know, it's like a bittersweet relationship that you can have, but you're always on top because you realize the relationship and the connection between the two, you and your shadow, right? And soon your shadow can become so small that it's almost not really there, you know? But when it is there, it's only there to push you. It sounds negative and it's weird. It's very weird. But hey, we can't be too sweet all the time. And our shadow self is definitely not going to be sweet to us. So, I really hope that you guys liked this. I still do have the idea though where I want to do my makeup, and then as I'm doing my makeup tutorial, it's just the voiceover of another initiation task. So, yeah, I will see you guys probably tomorrow. Toodaloo.